Seriously, Bud is brought to you by OmniSend. OmniSend is a top choice for email and SMS marketing on WordPress, perfect for WooCommerce shops. Easily connect with customers and send out awesome campaigns every day. We'll be back in a bit to tell you about our other friendly sponsors. Hello, my name is Bree, and welcome to Seriously, Bud, a podcast featuring an unexpected conversation with someone from the WordPress community. And now it's time for our host, my dad, Bud Kraus.
Thank you, Bree. I'm not Bud, but I had so much fun being the first guest on this show that I thought I'd do this all over again, but from the other chair. I'm Marcus Burnett, and I'll be back at the end to give you my thoughts about this week's episode. It's number 50, so here we go. Bud Kraus, welcome to Seriously, Bud?
Wait a second. Hold on a second here. What? Who is this?
Oh, hey everyone, this is Marcus Burnett, Seriously Bud's first guest, and I am back today to turn the spotlight on the host himself, Mr. Bud Kraus.
Who let you in? I guess I did.
I begged you to be able to interview you and turn this back on yourself, and I think that people deserve to hear a bit of your story now that they've been listening to others for the last 49 episodes. So now it's your turn.
Actually, for those last 49 episodes, sometimes I think that's all they do is hear about me. And I always have to cut myself out because really the purpose of the show is to let other people talk, not me, except for today.
Yes. Well, you've teased everyone long enough. People want to hear more about you. So
I doubt it.
Let's start. What is this Abbey Road Light Show?
Seriously, Marcus, we're going to start with the Abbey Road Light Show.
Yes.
Okay. So I know that you have some questions here that you want to ask, and this is a very important question. When I was in college, one of the things I created was with some other friends of mine, the Abbey Road Light Show. Now, this will sound very disgusting today, but everybody would get high, and then we would listen to the second side of Abbey Road, and we would turn off all the lights, and we would light 2 cigarettes, and we would do this. I obviously can't see this. We would do like a light show with our hands with the cigarettes. So you would see like these cigarettes going in circles or lines or it was kind of fun. And we sort of always did it the same way. It became sort of a performance that me and my friends got known for. And we would do it all together. And okay, enough of this. I think I'll cut that out. No.
It was just you all, or you'd invite folks over to enjoy this performance?
Oh, I would do it in college. I did it in my house once, for about 80 people. And it got out of hand. Okay. Every party I went to, people would say, come on, you got to do the Abbey Road Light Show. So, I sort of got known for doing that. And it was a good friend of mine, Lance. We invented it at Case Western Reserve in Cleveland, Ohio. And anyway, it was fun. Now I look back on it, it seems very stupid, but when you're 19 years old, but that's ancient history, but it was a lot of fun to do this kind of performance in the dark. Of course, cigarette smoke and all that. Oh my God. The thought of that is just, nauseating. But
yeah.
Whatever.
Well, you're a music person. This might seem a little morbid, but a curious question for you. What song do you want to listen to as you die?
That's easy. I think it's Comfortably Numb by Pink Floyd. I just love that song. I think it's so beautiful. It's haunting. It's just a beautiful song. And it's easy to play on guitar too, just in case I want to do that. It's relatively easy to play.
You're going to play it while you're dying?
Yeah. Not the solo. I can't do that stuff, but the chords are relatively easy. And it's just this beautiful song that is awesome and inspiring. And if that's the way I go out. Now, if for any reason that's not going to work, then anything like Beethoven will do, basically, or Bach or something like that. But I'd prefer to go out with Comfortably Numb.
I appreciate the backup plan. You didn't ask me to ask you this, but how do you envision that happening? Are you peacefully fading away in your sleep? Are you going down in an airplane?
I used to think that. Okay, I don't think that anymore. I think it's probably peacefully sleeping, that kind of thing, like the way most people go. And I think that would be the best way. All right, enough of this, man. This is sick.
Let's go back to the other end. Where were you born and where did you grow up? Let's learn a little bit about young Bud.
A little better. Yeah, I was born in Cleveland, Ohio. I grew up near Shaker Square, which is the first shopping center in America. But I didn't grow up much there because in the early 1960s, my parents moved us to a new home that was built in Pepper Pike, Ohio. I kid you not, that's the name of it, Pepper Pike, Ohio. And everybody had to have an acre and a half of land that was required. It was a little dicey because we were Jewish, still I am, but my parents had to get permission from the neighbors to move there, to build. And not everybody was in agreement because of their religion. And so that was sort of like the tenor of my days in the Orange school system and, presented some problems here and there. My dad was a mechanical engineer. He went to Case. And my mother, she didn't graduate from Ohio State, but she was the best baker, cooker, and she taught all that through her whole life. So she was the teacher, in the family. But my dad, he was not what I would call a good kid's dad. He didn't get on the floor and roll around. He was better as an adult than as like a little kid's father. And I do have a sister. I better get that in there just in case. I have a sister who's a year and a half younger that we're not very similar, but we are in one regard. She's really funny. And we know how to make each other laugh, which is a good thing, especially when there are conflicts. So
the sense of humor come from each other? Is it something from your parents?
Well, from my dad. My dad was the funniest person I ever met. God, he was hysterical. He had a very ironic, sarcastic sense of humor. He wasn't like with the prepared jokes, not like me. I don't know one joke, but he can make jokes out of politics or like surroundings or people, or it came from him that he was so funny. I used to call him every Sunday after we would watch the Sunday morning talk shows, and we'd have a blast about what we just heard, So, yeah, he was. And the great thing about my dad, which is very different than me, is he never laughed at any of his jokes. So he knew it was funny, but after he'd say something funny and everybody was laughing, he would just have like this deadpan face, I can't do that. I have to laugh at my own. I just cannot do that. He was so damn good at it, But, I don't ever remember the two of us talking about having a sense of humor. I don't think we ever did, We just had fun making jokes,
Just all part of that Midwestern Jewish family culture.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Right. You don't think of like Midwesterners, Jewish family culture, but, you think of like New York and the Borscht Belt, and all that. But no, we were there in Cleveland and, that's where, I spent my entire childhood in northeastern Ohio.
So you grew up in Ohio. You eventually obviously went to high school. You said in a number of your episodes that you had a miserable experience in high school. What kind of a student were you? Were you a good student, bad student, got in trouble?
Can I swear? I was shitty. I was not a good student.
It's your show. You do what you want.
I know. But nobody ever swears on my show, so I sort of just broke the ice. But because I rarely swear, but I was uninspired. I thought the teachers who taught me weren't cool.
Were you bored? Were you just too smart for what was going on?
No. I was terrible in mathematics. That's sort of my dad's fault because whatever. I won't blame it on my dad, but my dad was really good at math and I was not. And, he didn't have patience. And so that made me think that I was just bad at math, and I became really bad at math. And so I would basically sleep during math classes, turned out to be nap classes. So I would just go to sleep. And then I was pretty good in English, but I didn't know that I was good at writing yet. That came later on. The long and short of it is, for the elementary school years, I had a lot of friends. They were all boys. I did a lot of stuff with them. I'm still in contact with a whole bunch of them. And when we hit middle school, there was something new came into our lives, and that was girls. And I was very confused. Should I love girls or hate girls? Because I was always hating them until middle school. And now all of a sudden I'm supposed to love them, and I was very confused. I had a real hard time talking to girls. And the bottom line, I always tell I have tons of high school friends now. That's a whole nother story, how that happened. But I always tell them I was ignored. It wasn't that I was like picked on and tortured, all that. People just ignored me because I guess I was there for 12 years. And after 12 years, you're like furniture and nobody talks to you anymore. Nobody cares anymore. And the day I graduated high school, I said to the two girls next to me, I said, thank God I never have to see you assholes again for the rest of my life, or I thought that, or I said it when I know I thought,
And then-
no. And then as it turned out, I'm now the most popular person in my high school class. Okay. But who cares? That's 50 years later.
You showed them.
Yeah. Well, yes. And I had the last laugh, and they all know how I feel, and they all know, some of them actually think that, I had a good time in high school. They've all been corrected. They do this revisionist history on me, oh, you really had a good time. But I never went to a party in high school. However.
Hey there. We'll get back to the show in just a moment. Seriously, Bud is made possible by Big Scoots. When it comes to WordPress hosting, there is no reason to compromise on service from your provider. Expect more. With 24/7, 365 live experts, Big Scoots redefines managed WordPress hosting service levels for clients, partners, and agencies. Learn more by visiting www.bigscoots.com and chat with a team member now. And by OS Training. We're thrilled to be supporting Bud's podcast and sponsor his exciting first ebook, Questions I Wish I Had Asked. This book gives Bud one last chance to ask a few of his guests the question that slipped away. Whether you're just starting out or already a pro, our courses and books cover everything from WordPress and Drupal to JavaScript and React. Join the OS Training community and start building the future today. Visit ostraining.com to learn more. And finally, by the WP.world, a great way to see who's in the WP world and what they are up to. Find out at the WP.world. That's right, it's the WP.world. And let others know what you're up to, too. Now, let's get back to the show.
I'm going to have to digress for a second. I did have a lot of friends that were outside of high school. And those friends were from the Cleveland Jewish community and beyond. So temples have these youth group things, like churches do,
Sure.
whatever, And so we had this thing called the Northeast Lakes Federation of Temple Youth. And these were synagogues that were affiliated along the Northeast Lakes, meaning Toronto, Buffalo, Erie, PA, famous cities like that, Cleveland, Akron, Canton, whatever. And these became my best friends while I was in high school. So I did have friends, and I hung around with them all the time. Now, check this out. You'll see where I'm going in a second. Before there was a WordPress community to me, there was the Nelfty community. And that was when I was in my 17, 18. So the stuff I'm experiencing today with all the WordPress people, I've been here before. I know it sounds kind of weird, but it's the same kind of people, the same kind of thinking, the same kind of cohesion, the same kind. WordCamp to me is the same thing as the Cleveland Conclave, 1968. Okay, it's the same thing, except instead of Judaism, we have WordPress. I know it sounds weird, but very, very similar. So I've been very fortunate to have these two fantastic communities in my life. The great thing about the WordPress community is I don't have to leave when I graduate from high school.
That's right.
Now I can stay until they throw me out. I tell my friends from my childhood, they ask me, well, what's this thing that I'm involved in? Like, what's it like? And I say, remember Nelfty? That's exactly what it's like. And then they understand.
So after high school, I presume you went to college.
I did.
Where did you go to college? What did you study?
Really want to go to school. It was really my mother's idea was that I was going to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, or accountant. Pick one of those four. It turned out I didn't want any of those. I mean, I could have been a really good lawyer. Back in those days, I looked at law as marriage lawyer, contract law. I just didn't.
Going to college was typical for the time, though, right? I mean, that's the obvious next move after high school.
Absolutely.
You don't really have other choices. You're going to college.
I went to a school. Now, you have to understand, it was an upper income kind of environment, and 98% of them went to college.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them were very smart, very good. They turned out to be, lawyers, doctors, accountants, and engineers. But I wasn't cut from that cloth. So I went to Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, where they have gorgeous women and a gorgeous campus. And in that order. Actually, yeah. So, because I'm very prejudiced to Ohio women. That's me. The Midwestern look, So I really didn't study anything. I mean, I the first year was basically a lot of drug taking and experimenting and playing music. And that's why I played guitar, because it was my way of trying to get women to pay attention to me, because they weren't going to do it because of my good looks,
Was there any thought direction to what you might do? Or were you just, my parents told me I need to go to college, I enrolled in some classes, and I'm here?
Yeah. In fact, here's how silly it was. I mean, I took like math, biology, all this kind of stuff that like, no way. Okay. Now, maybe today I would like some of it, but back then.
Well, the first 2 years of college are just core classes that everyone needs to take anyways. So you can show up and sign up for those. And
like bowling and stuff like that. I did take
bowling.
Yeah, I took bowling. I did very well in bowling. So after the first year, I really loved it. I was friends with a million women. Okay. I was just like, I just hung out in their dorms and, I didn't have a girlfriend, but I had a million girlfriends. I did.
How did you go from not talking to anybody in high school to having a million girlfriends in college? Did you just did a reset? Was it just a new scenery? Yes. You decided you were going to be a different person? Not a different person, but be known, be a little less shy maybe?
I think when you go to college or any other time, when you're a child, somewhere along the line, you get to do a reset. It's sort of like the cage bird has flown or the caterpillar becomes a butterfly, whatever. So speaking of somebody that probably has never done a reset, but she doesn't have to, that's why, is my wife, Arlene. Come here, dear.
He never talks to me like that in real life. I just want you to know.
Now, this is a historic first because no one has ever been on the show. Like there's never been like a duo. And the reason why I want her to be here, just to say hello, because if you've ever heard any of my episodes, she gets in there by osmosis, I guess.
By default.
Yeah, by default. Because I love to, like, she's like, I don't know, what do you call it? Like a springboard, not a springboard, but like a backstop,
I believe the term is better half.
Thank you, Marcus. You need to get your lines from him.
No, do you? Yeah. Oh, Marcus is too serious. So what do you do? So tell us like what you do for a living and what you're going to be doing.
What do? I work in the garment center. I don't recommend anyone going into the garment industry. When I first got into it, it was good. It's just one of those industries that it's very stressful. I'm working from home today. I work from home on Fridays, thankfully, thanks to COVID. But what do I do? Well, my entire career, I've always dealt with the inception side of product development. In my early years, I was designer, but then saw real soon that if I wanted to have longevity in my career, I had to reinvent myself. So I actually have had many different jobs within the umbrella of the garment industry in an effort to constantly make myself relevant in an industry, especially in the design, the creative end, as in a lot of industries of the creative side, you're only as good as your last winner. And it is true. And in clothing design as well. And I was not in high price. I was in popular price. Like middle America wore the things that I designed. But I did remorph. I started getting involved in all the other aspects. And I saw it at an early time that the production aspect of apparel was going more and more offshore and all the other ancillary aspects of it. So I just started taking jobs that enabled me to see that side of it. I did a lot of traveling too.
Hold on a second. This is not a show about what you do.
You asked me, so I'm giving the background. You can cut it all out, Marcus.
No, I'm not going to cut it out, but just, no, that's too much. We don't even talk about what we do. And would you like me to interview you sometime for the show?
Anyway,
why don't you just go on the show sometime? Okay, go ahead.
I'm going back to work in a few minutes. Anyway, fast forward, learning a lot of different things. And now I am a director of technical design. So I'm out of the true design stage and I'm responsible from the point that the designer designs the product until it gets into production and everything that's involved. So it's very stressful because it's a very time-sensitive product. And dealing with overseas factories adds a lot to the challenges. And I'm going to be getting out of it soon. This is my last year. So I've been working for 44 years in the same industry.
Oh, congrats.
So anyway, I did start to go down that rabbit hole. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, that's the way it goes. Now, what's it like to be married to Bud? Can you tell me a little bit about
You don't even want me to go there.
You're probably right. I was just kidding. Never mind.
Bud will have his chance in a moment to tell his side of the story, but how did you and Bud meet?
I was in New York. Bud was in New York. My aunt is in the same community as Bud's parents. And they went to the same temple and they must have run into each other. And you know how the elders talk, oh, my niece is in New York. Oh, my son is in New York. So my aunt gave Bud's phone number to my mom. My aunt, it was her sister, very close. And for 6 months, my mom would always say, "Oh, did you call that nice Jewish boy from Cleveland?" And I would,
If only she knew.
and I'm like, "No." I said, it's like, I don't need you organizing my love life. But no, but in reality, when I moved to New York right after college, and I grew up in a tiny town in the Midwest, I was very naive and blinders on. And here I was in the big city. And I was just realizing that I missed the kinds of friendships that I had had in the Midwest. It was just the quality of the people I was meeting, especially in men, just wasn't. So I said, you know what? This guy, we're similar backgrounds. He knows my family. Just have a friend, someone that has similar background as me. And I was dating somebody else from college, but the rest is history. The day I finally called him, this is before cell phones, and this was like in
so you
the
called
early
him
80s.
out of the blue. Was he expecting a call?
I got home from work. I'm like, all right, I'm going to call this guy. And he starts talking to me. And I'm like, you don't know me, but and so we just started chatting, and we were having a nice conversation. And then all of a sudden, Bud says, well, this is great. You're taking my mind off of, I just got home from work and my apartment has been vandalized. I'm like, what? Said,
wow.
Literally, he had walked in from work and his apartment had been vandalized. And I'm like, why are you talking to me? Shouldn't you be like dealing with this? So the PS of that story, because we were very young and struggling in our professions, but through the insurance claim, he was able to wine and dine me very nicely that summer when we started dating. So that was nice. But yeah, that's how we met. And we both were dating people, and that soon ended when we just realized. But the weird thing is, like, when we first met, we were like reading the same book, and it was not like a common book. And it was like. So what that was saying is that, besides values, we had some similar interests.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have a lot of different interests,
Sure.
but there were similar core things that we shared. And that's, what starts a relationship.
Well, hang on a second. How long did you all date before you got married?
A year and a half.
Yeah.
Almost 2 years.
Okay.
Well, you gave me the ultimatum that I better propose to you or you're gone. But
well, it's like we fell into a fast relationship, and we were young, but all my friends were getting married. And I was like, look, is this going to go somewhere or isn't it?
Well, yeah, have to make a decision.
So Bud had to be pushed a little bit.
And here we are a few years later.
I don't think you regret it.
No, I was,
2 kids later, 2 grandkids later.
Yeah.
I've never heard Bud say anything but positive things about his wife, Arlene.
I always say to know her.
That's good.
I always say, and everybody,
I don't know what he screams into his pillow at night, but to me, I've only heard positive things.
To know her is to love her. Everybody loves her. Not true with me. I'm more like, an acquired taste. But everybody knows she's a small town girl living in a big town world, that kind of thing. You're still small town.
Actually, I just got a very nice compliment from one of my staff people. I was just in a Zoom.
You want to tell me this later?
He'll tell me. No, well, because
Okay.
And I'm not saying this to toot my horn, because I'm very humble. Like I work with my employees. I don't act as a boss per se.
It's very Midwest of you.
We're embarking on tons of training, tons of new software. Our company is huge in technology in our area. So I was in this training. It's 3D, using avatars to dress them with patterns and garments. And it's very involved.
Yeah.
And I'm in like my 5th class, and I'm with these other people that are light years ahead of me. At the end, I'm telling the instructor, I'm like, maybe we need to start segmenting and have them being a more advanced, and maybe you and I need to be on one-on-one. And I was just in a Zoom with one of my staff people, a technical designer, and she's like, why are you putting yourself down? She goes, you're amazing. She goes, you're at the director level and you're still pushing yourself, and you have such a great attitude. I said, thank you. I said, you made me feel good. But I guess, I look at the glass as half full instead of half empty. And Bud will tell you that has been my life motto. I just do. And not that there are things that get me down, but I just, life's too short. You got to try to find the little good thing in everything. I got that from my mother.
Absolutely.
So that's it.
All right, you're out of here.
It was nice meeting you. I've heard a lot about you.
You as well.
Arlene, I think you're like a natural here. I think Arlene needs to do this show called Seriously, Arlene.
No, I got to go back to work. All right, take care, Marcus.
Thank you so much, Arlene. Let's focus back on talking a little bit about your college days. So you were an intern in Washington, D.C. for a U.S. senator. Tell us that story.
Yeah, before I do, though, I have to thank my wife for her appearance on the show, because it's not really her thing, but she acted like it was. So kudos to Arlene. Okay, the question about intern. In 1974, I was an intern for Howard Metzenbaum, who was a senator from Ohio. He got his job and I got my job as a consequence of Watergate. believe it or not. That's a whole other story. I'm not going down there. Turns out, bottom line, that after 3 months in Washington, I decided I'm not really cut out, or I'm not really interested in Washington, and it's just too damn muggy in the summer. So that was the end of my career in Washington.
Probably got a chance to meet a number of people while you're doing that, though. Can you name one person that you'd love to see or talk to again?
Not necessarily from Washington, but I did during, when I think about that era of my life, college, and I had a girlfriend. Her name was Cindy. And of all the people I would want to see again and talk to, at least, it would be her. Well, last I know, she disappeared somewhere in California. So that's over 50 years ago. I really liked her an awful lot, and it would just be a blast to talk to her. We had such a good time together and getting to know her parents. She lived in Dayton, Ohio, and we met on our trip to Mexico, and because we were both studying Spanish in 1975. So she'd be number one on the list. There's a few others, but the cool thing is I'm in touch with so many people from my past that I have very few on the list that I would like to talk to, because I talk to them all the time, all these people.
I was going to say, with all the social media and all of that, 50 years ago was the last time you heard from her, about her, or any whereabouts?
Yeah, and I've looked online. I've looked her. It's just not, I know what her married name is. I know all that. And there's just some people that are very hard to find. And, now it's, maybe she's no longer with us. I hope that's not true, obviously, but.
Yeah, she may not be into Facebook, social media, and all of that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Definitely. There are people my age who don't want to have anything to do with that stuff. And so it's kind of hard to find them.
All right. Jumping back. You moved to New York City in 1977 and spent about 17 years in the insurance business.
Yes.
That's not what you do now. So was that a waste of time? And how do you feel about New York City? Well, you don't live there now either.
Yeah. Well, I live 12 miles from New York. So I definitely
That's true. You're very close.
Although we're moving this year, we'll still be an hour south, but, still in the general area. I have to say, insurance, I have said this before on the show, which is I always look at insurance as the career industry that people go into when they don't know what they want to do with themselves. So I really, like everybody else, I fell into it. Here's what I loved about it, which is my clients are largely in the entertainment industry. So it's a specialty in the insurance world to be insuring film and television and documentaries and theater and all that. I mean, it's a specialty. If you know what Robbie Adair does, Robbie would be a client of mine today. Yeah. Well, maybe not, but she'd be an insurance client of mine. I've told her that a few thousand times. And what I ended up hating was the insurance industry itself. I found it to be a very negative industry because there were people who fell into it. They didn't want to be there. And it was tough, but I did love working with clients. They treated me like royalty because I understood their business and the application of insurance. And it turned out I really loved insurance. That is, the contracts, the concepts behind insurance. Loved it. Absolutely loved that part. But everything else was just terrible. The business was just ridiculous. I hated it. So when the internet came around, I said, that's where I'm going to go, even though I didn't know what I was going to do. As far as New York goes, geez, I have a love affair too with New York City. I love the people. I love the city, the architecture. I still get a charge, believe it or not, when I come into New York. There's just something about its vibrancy, its people. I think the people are fantastic. When I first moved here, and before that, if somebody had said you were going to one day live here and love it, and I would say, oh, I'm afraid of those people. Aren't they really nasty and rude? And because that's I grew up in Ohio, and that's the consensus from people, I guess, around the whole country is like, oh my God, New Yorkers are so rude. No, they're not. They're tough. They have a heart of gold in general. And the other cool thing about New York is that like hardly anybody in New York is from New York. And that's one of the places where I first started taking an interest about people from around the world, because we work in any office and it's the United Nations. It's people from all over the world. My friends were from Russia, Japan, China, in the early days of being in New York. So I love that. Philippines. I didn't really run into too many New Yorkers. I mean, of course I did, but I always had an eye out for people from around the world.
You and Arlene earlier came on, and she talked a little bit about how you guys met. I want to hear your side of the story. And do you have any kids, any grandkids?
Well, I don't have to change anything that she said. We have 2 kids. We have a son who is a biomedical engineer who went to Case, just like my father, who was an engineer I mentioned earlier. And turns out, you'll love this, that the Abbey Road Light Show was created in the same room at Case all right, or Case Western Reserve in Cleveland. It was created in the same room where he was a student at 40 years earlier. All right, if that makes any sense, it's 405 Pierce Hall at Case Western Reserve. So my friend Lance and Gabe both had the same room 40 years apart. How about that? So he's working in the field. My daughter is a couple years younger, and she went to Keene, New Hampshire. Beautiful town. Oh, my God, I love Keene. And she works now for the Real Real. She got a degree in graphic design, as did her husband, who she met at Keene. And my son has 2 children. He has, the loves of my life, my 4-year-old grandson and my 2-year-old grandson. I am the grandparent that lets the grandkids do whatever they want. If you want to eat M&Ms off the floor or whatever, I don't care. Just don't get hurt. And so, of course, they're always beating me up and pounding me and stuff like that. It's great. I mean, I'm so fortunate to have everybody in my life, but those 2 guys, those 2 little boys are just really super special to me. To watch them grow up and think and learn, and oh my God, there's nothing more fun, I think, than watching somebody learn, and observing how we learn is just one of the coolest things you can do.
Yeah, that kind of sets up the trajectory of what you've done.
Yeah.
Since insurance with WordPress and all of that as a teacher is just watching people get to learn.
I have to say that if I were not teaching web design, WordPress, all that, I would have ended up teaching insurance, because in fact, I basically was. I was like the go-to guy in the office where everybody would come to me and say, what does that mean? They'd read something in a contract and they go, does that mean that that's covered or whatever? So I was already teaching insurance, and I was really headed to probably teach at the College of Insurance had I not been saved. So whatever.
Well, we appreciate you coming over to the WordPress side of things.
Me too.
Speaking of learning things, what are you good at? Or tell us maybe some things that people probably don't know about you.
Well, I love architecture. That's something that you probably don't know. I'm good at writing. I learned how to write and got better at it over time and really like doing it. I think I've learned to become a better listener over time too, and a little more empathetic. In fact, that's the last thing I'll say about this is, here's a little unknown fact about me. I am an empath. Now, we probably all are empaths to one way or another, but I can feel your pain. So really, and my mother was too. She could really feel people's emotions, and I can too. I'm not always really good with it, but I think I'm a little better than most. Maybe it's because of all the stuff that I've gone through in my life, but I really do feel people's suffering a little more deeply, I think, than other people. Yeah.
Those are good. What I was fishing for maybe was a little bit of telling me about some of your musical background, much like a lot of WordPress folks.
Yeah.
You definitely have a musical background. You said you can name songs in just a note or two. Does that come from you learning to play an instrument?
I don't know where it comes from, but that's one of those useless kind of, maybe not useless, but maybe it is. You can, there was a show on TV 1,000 years ago called Name That Tune. Mm-hmm. And I would have been a superstar, because when you think about it, there's only like 8 notes in an octave, right? And then you got a bunch of the flats and the sharps. So whatever, 13 keys, right? So how do you know the song with 13? It's the rhythm, it's all kinds of things. And I can tell from like 1 or 2 notes what a song is. And the really weird thing is that once I learn the lyrics, I don't forget them. So I'm able to sing songs from like 1,000 years ago and the lyrics. And so I have a musical ear. There's no question I can play. Fortunately, I can't see music, so I play it by ear, which I think is the best way to play guitar. It's the only way to play, really. So that when you sit down with other people, no one's sitting there with music. They're just playing, and that's what it is. You have to not be afraid to make mistakes. When you play that way, you just play, and I played with a lot of really good players, and, I stink, but it doesn't matter. It's fun. They make me sound good, so.
You said guitar is what you learned. Did you learn that growing up? Is that more recent? When did you start?
Well, I think I was 13 years old. And by the time I was in college, I used that as my little tool to meet women. But I love it. Now, today, my favorite guitar is a 12-string Taylor, which is a beautiful guitar. And I love the sound of 12-string because it's so rich and deep and thick and just beautiful. So it's perfect for strummers like me. I'm more of a strummer than a picker.
I want you to name 3 of your favorite nights, not including weddings or family stuff.
Okay, the first one probably has to be my 50th high school reunion night. That was over the top. I had sort of realized this already, but this was the icing on the cake where I realized that all the pain and suffering that I endured in high school was now in the past. It was in the rearview mirror that I was healed. And that journey of 50 years of healing from all the pain of high school was so important to me. I didn't really realize that until I took that journey. And of course, so many of them are such good friends of mine today. I was actually one of the 4 people who was the organizer of the event, which was held in Cleveland, Ohio. And what did I do? Well, I did the website and communications and stuff like that. Of course, they all marveled that I knew how to make a website, and it was fun. I mean, it was great. It's always fun to do websites when you're unrestricted. You can
I don't mean this in a negative way by any means, but how large of a group was 50th high school reunion? Was it a intimate get together?
No, what was kind of cool was that because it was it was in 2022, so we were just through COVID or sort of in the middle, and everybody had been vaccinated. Some people wore masks, and it was with 2 classes. It wasn't just our class of 71; it was also the classes 69 and 70. And I actually hung around with the women of the class of 70 because I just had more fun with them for whatever reason. So the total that were there that night was about, I would say, 300 or so people. So it was a nice crowd. Yeah. My class total graduated was 225. And I was smack dab in the middle when it comes to academic achievement. I could have done so much better, but I just didn't, whatever.
That's one. Do you have two other favorite nights? Something about a party in the summer of 1972.
Oh, yeah. So we had this huge party. It was the middle of school, and I did the Abbey Road Light Show. Boy, that keeps coming up through this thing. I don't know why. But we had a lot. My sister and I invited all of our friends from high school and college. And it turns out a lot of friends from college went to my high school. So it was really cool. For the first time ever, I had all these kids in from high school were in my house, and I started to get to know them even from that moment on. I remember talking to one of the cheerleaders saying, "Did you have a good time in high school? It looks like you had a blast." And she goes, "No, it wasn't that good." And I thought well, if it wasn't good for you, who was it good for? That was a great night. And there's a lot of stories just in that night. So I'm going to leave that one. And what was the other one?
More recently, the diversity party at WordCamp Europe 2023.
Oh, God. Now, if you were there, you know what I'm talking about. I think that was the best WordCamp party I ever went to. It was in Athens, Greece. It was done by Newfold, Bluehost, and Yoast, and somebody else too, I think. Anyway, it was in Athens, Greece, and it was the diversity party. And it was just great. That's all I can say. It was, if you were there, there was dancing. There was just, anytime there's dancing, it's going to be good. So, because dancing is one of my things.
What's one thing you wish you had never done?
That's easy. And it's really one thing, and that's smoking cigarettes. Oh, God, how stupid could you be?
How long did you smoke cigarettes?
Any one day is too long. Okay.
Agreed.
So I don't want to answer that question. It wasn't like last week that I stopped. Okay. So anybody thinks because he just quit. It's been years. And in fact, a little clue would be, what really, like a lot of people, I started, I stopped, I started. It was like heroin. In the early 90s, when I was being examined, one of my millions of eye exams, the doctor said to me, we can tell everything about looking at the back of your eye, and we can even tell if you smoke. He didn't say anything other than that. That's it. Mm-hmm. When I heard that, I go, you're serious. And it turns out that cigarette smoke is one of the risk factors of the disease that I have, or the condition. And, I'm not saying that that's what caused my condition, which is macular degeneration, but it didn't help. So I really regret that. Even to this day, years later, I wish I did not do that. What's really nice too is getting people to stop smoking cigarettes is the most significant and impressive U.S. successful health initiative that we've ever had in history. Look how many people don't smoke now. My kids, it's wonderful. Now I know vaping, and I get it.
Yeah.
But in the United States, it's a big win for us that people have stopped smoking.
I remember when I was a bit younger, it was the cool thing to do, and then it became not the cool thing to do. And so a lot of my friends just never did it just because it wasn't the cool thing to do. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
I mean, whatever that campaign was that made it not the cool thing to do was fairly successful.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Why have you never taken a cruise?
Because and this is me really, but Arlene would take a cruise. Okay. She would take anything, but I'm fussy about wanting to eat dinners in cities at night. And that's a hard thing to do when you're on a cruise. Now, I know some crews do stay overnight in cities, but most of them seem to use the nighttime to move the boat somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to just like say, okay, get on the boat at 5:00 at night and we're going to eat a dinner on the boat. I want to eat in Paris or Vienna or Madrid or you name it. Because I'm a European. I always say this. I have the European blood. I'm an Eastern European. And I like to stay out late at night, have a dinner, drink wine or drinks or whatever at 2:00 in the morning. That's just the way I go, you know? You can't really do that on a cruise. But maybe one day we'll take a riverboat cruise. That's possible.
Those are more intimate and do stop along the way and let you stay in the cities at night and have those meals.
Yeah.
I want to jump back a little bit to you've talked about some through mostly college, but with the guitar playing as being a way to pick, be around the ladies. Why have you always had so many female friends?
Because I look like, I don't know. I was going to say I look like George Costanza. I meant George Clooney. I think it's because I'm not threatening. I don't do anything inappropriate. I've never ever made any physical inappropriate gesture or anything like that on a woman. And I think they know I'm not going to do that. So I think there's a safety factor being with me. I would never even think of those things. It's even hard to say that. And I also think that women are smarter than men. So I'd like to hang around with smart people.
I think that's fair. Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I agree with you.
Yeah, don't get me started, but I really do think women are smarter than men. Trust me, I know I'm one of them. I mean, a man. So I do. I know it's a weird kind of thing to say that women are smarter than men, but women are smarter than men. I just think they're more fun. And I don't know. It's really funny because in the WordPress community, they're mostly guys.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mind guys, but I just think women are more fun. So whatever. And I do have quite a number of female friends. And I've had, it's been that way for a very long time. So I hope to keep going that way. My dad was a bit of a ladies' man. Now, I'm not a ladies' man by any stretch, okay? But he was. The women sort of gravitated to my father, and he was pretty good looking, but, he was a good listener, and he liked women too, obviously. Oh, I know he did, so whatever.
It's funny because you kind of talked about that being the case for college. I actually see that in the WordPress community with you too. That sort of seems to be kind of a trend there as well. That you have a lot of, despite the WordPress community being a male dominated community, a lot of female friends in the community.
Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say anything other than
that's smart. All right, continuing the music theme, who is your favorite musician and who is no longer alive that you would love to talk to?
Well, I think we could say that it's both the same, which is the two people that I would have loved to have met and talked to. One would be John Lennon, and the other would be somebody that John Lennon was friends with and who was a musician, was Harry Nilsson. Now, both of them have something in common. They were English, but they had this sarcastic, biting kind of approach to things, but I love. It would be so much fun to have talked to both of them. Now, Harry Nilsson's not obviously as well known, but did a lot of very well known songs. And a lot of his humor is just humor. That is, I love like corny, silly songs. The lyrics are silly. The words, the ideas are silly. I sort of love that stuff. But the music is good. And so he did a lot of that. Anyway, I wish I had run into John. I was in New York the night he was killed, and it was horrific, to say the least. So
you've set yourself up in the right place to potentially meet some of these folks. New York is, famous for all sorts of music.
going back to what we were talking about before, I would have never had the experiences I had I not lived in this area in terms of meeting people, in terms of, don't get me started because it's like sort of a name dropping and I don't want to get into all that stuff. But I was very fortunate in meeting so many really great people. I'll give you one, okay? I don't want to, but one of my favorites was that I got to know a bit was Julie Stein. Now, if you don't know the name Julie Stein, he was one of the most famous, I know, sounds crazy, composers of the 20th century. And he wrote the lyrics for, was it the lyrics of the music? I always forget. Peter Pan and Gypsy and a whole bunch of other things. And he got an Oscar for 3 coins in a fountain with Sammy Kahn. And these are guys that go back to the 40s and 50s. But when I met Julie Stein, it was in the 1980s. He was great. I mean, I went to his apartment on the Upper East Side and he opens up the door and there's Julie Stein, sort of the Paul McCartney of his age. Okay. That's how, and he opens up and he's got he looks at me and he goes, "Oh, I thought you were the plumber." So, okay, Mr. Stein. So anyway, what the really cool thing was you go into his apartment. It was a nice apartment and he had all these paintings, right? And he would look at me like, "See this painting over here of Marilyn? Irving did that." So he's talking to you like you're one of his good buddies, and he's talking about Irving Berlin doing a painting of Marilyn Monroe. But he's talking to you like you know all these people. Oh, he was great. What a wonderful guy. And his wife, too. Oh, my God, I loved both of them, Anyway, so, some people are just so down to earth, no matter how famous they are and rich or whatever, they can be just so fantastic, So anyway, enough of that. I've met people like that.
That's a great story. And
yeah,
again, the city's one in a million.
Yeah.
Place to meet those kinds of folks.
What makes it so great. But, the other side of the coin is you could have, and I had a 2-hour conversation with a homeless guy before I took my trip around the country on Amtrak. And I spent 2 hours talking to him. How'd you get homeless? What happened here? Why are you here? That kind of thing. It runs the gamut. It's just such, if you just open your mind, your heart, your brain to the people here, you're going to get rewarded. It's just fabulous. I'm just so glad I live here.
Let's fast forward to today. You talked a little bit about your legal blindness. Why do you say that you're legally blind? Were you always that way? And then I also have heard you describe it as a gift. I want to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, I say that I'm legally blind because I am legally blind. Okay, that's the reason why I say it. And it's really funny. I love to watch people's reactions when you say that because it's like, like, what? Either don't believe you or they get scared because blindness is something to really be afraid of. And their reactions are, it's just interesting. Now, as far as, was I always this way? No, I was not. I became this way when I was 37 years old. I'm not going to get into whatever happened. It was basically one day I started noticing there was a problem that wouldn't go away in one of my eyes. And eventually this problem was in both eyes. And I'd had 5 laser surgeries in the eyes. Now, this is not LASIK. Okay. This is the kind of surgery that they basically say, do you want to go blind or partially blind through the natural course of the condition, or we'll cauterize the blood vessels in your eye, but you're going to have scar tissue and blindness from that. Which one do you want? I said,
great choice.
That's it? Yeah.
Yeah.
None of the above.
I'll take the third option, whatever that is.
None of the above. Thank you. That's not your option. So it's brutal, okay, to go through something like that when your choices are just terrible. Okay. Trust me, that is a very tough thing to go through. Bottom line is, since 1992, I have not had a major change in my vision, although it could happen at any time. Macular degeneration is the leading cause of legal blindness in the United States. It generally happens to people that are older, so 37 is very unusual. It's not the greatest thing that could ever happen to you, that's for sure, but it's not cancer. I've had that too. But as far as a gift goes, it's a gift because I would not have done things that I have done without this condition. Case in point, I always point out, is speaking at WordCamp Europe in 2023. My topic was using low vision as my tool to help me teach WordPress. And a whole lot of other things, people I've met. And you know what's really cool too, is that it gives you a filter on the world that you would not normally have. So you sort of had this built-in filter about accessibility, usability, all that kind of stuff that just comes with this, that you become like super focused on, good choice of words, on what works and what doesn't work, whether it's websites or turnstiles or any kind of thing, things in cars. It's a filter. Is it inconvenient? It can be. I don't drive anymore, but I don't look at it as, I look at it the positive or the good. I will say one thing, because the kids have always known me this way, really. They learned early on when I said, I want to see something, what would they do? They would put the object in my hand. And so with vision and with touch together, those two senses, I was able to figure out what I was looking at. Okay, so one last thing about this, they always say if you go blind, you'll smell better. No. Well, first of all, I don't smell better.
Heightened senses.
I put on Paco Rabanne and I smell better. No, no, it's your sense of touch gets better. I will say there's no question that touch gets better. It has to. So
it learns to work in tandem to help you understand what's going on.
And that's really all about accessibility, or assistive technology, which is a technology which helps bridge that which is missing normally. So touch. Anyway, can I say one last thing too? Believe it or not, I generally don't talk about this kind of stuff for the reason is that it just bores me. It's sort of like talking about being right-handed. Like, really? You're going to talk about being right-handed? This is just me. So anyway.
Let's switch it then. What are 3 fulfilling things that you did in your life? That's got to be less boring.
I think so. One was in 1970. I went to Israel for the first time and worked on a place called Na'ot Kidumim, which is, it was called then the Gardens of Israel. Now it's called the Biblical Landscape Preserve of Israel. It's about 600 acres. When we were there, there was nothing there. It was like the dark side of the moon. It was unreclaimed, rocky land. And our job was to make it so with dynamite. We didn't do the dynamite part, but clear enough rocks and stuff so that they could dynamite an area so that the heavy equipment could come in and start building roads and stuff like that. Bottom line, today, they get about 300,000 visitors a year from all faiths where they can see all types of flora and fauna and animals, everything that's in the Bible, you can find at Na'ot Kidumim. Now, here's the funniest part of it, which is when I was 17 and I was with about 30 kids from all over the United States that we had come there to Israel to work on this place. We would kid around saying like, well, one day there'll be a souvenir stand over there where you can buy, Na'ot Kidumim t-shirts, and I'd say, oh, come on, that's ridiculous. This place is a dud. It'll never happen. Oh, it happened. And the few times that I've been back, they treat me like a king. I'm one of the originals, they treat me like, if it weren't for you, we wouldn't have this place today.
Yeah, but there's no souvenir shop, right?
Oh, yes, there is. Oh, no. Oh, no. There's a souvenir shop. There's people movers. There's all kinds of, it's unbelievable. Yeah. So that absolutely is, I've said I want to be buried there. I don't think they have a cemetery there, but I wouldn't mind being buried there because it's a very special place to me that I've been to a couple of times in my life. So, and the others accomplishments, let me think. Okay, so I have 2 others. One is I built a deck on the back of my house. I overbuilt it. This was when we first moved in the house, and it's really nice. It's not your typical deck because it has about $5,000 worth of hardware holding it up. So we had a Hurricane Sandy come by. The whole house could have been knocked over, but the deck would have still been there. Absolutely. So it was way overbuilt. And then the other one would be this podcast has been, I think, one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done in my life, way beyond what I could have imagined when I started a year ago. In fact, it's sort of taking over my life and I don't mind. Go ahead, take me over because it's fun. And what makes it so much fun is that I get to do exactly what I set out to do when I thought of this, which is I want to have conversations with people in the WordPress community other than what's your WordPress journey? What do you do with this plugin? Did you see this little snippet of code? Did you see what was in the news? We have so many of those kinds of podcasts, which is fine. They're all good. I listen to them. But I wanted to have life stories because that's the thing that interests me. That's the thing that I started getting into when I took that trip around the United States, was just listening to people's stories. And what I found was that everybody, and I really do mean this because I've listened to a lot of stories, have a really interesting story to tell. Just let them tell it and get out of the way is what I try to do. Even you, Marcus, you had a really good story. Arlene liked it.
Oh,
So
well, I appreciate that. And I'm not just saying this because I did get to be the first guest on your show, but I know that you shared a little bit about why you started the podcast, but I know there are also bits and pieces of the podcast that come from other places that you've been inspired by, different shows and stuff. Can you share some of those where different parts of the podcast come from?
There's certainly ours that I sort of, in my mind, at least pay homage to certain people and things. For example, in the beginning of the podcast, when I say, so here we go, that's homage to Josepha Hayden Shamfasi, who said the same thing basically in her WP briefing. And then when I say, Marcus Burnett, welcome to Seriously Bud, that came from David Axelrod. He had a politics podcast where he'd say like, Madeleine Albright, welcome to whatever it was. Okay. And then at the very end, when I say things like, until next time, thank you for your time, sort of comes from a sports podcaster of the 1960s in Cleveland, Ohio, who said very much the same kind of thing. The thing about me is I don't think of anything original, but I'm really good at synthesizing all these different ideas, and I just sort of repurpose and repackage, because when it comes to thinking anything that's good, original, I'm not really good at that. So
I think it's neat that you kind of, reference back to some of those things that have inspired you along the way to even do this show in the first place.
Yeah. And of course, one last thing, the music too. When I went looking for the music, I knew exactly what I wanted. And when I heard this, I said, that's it. I wanted this old folksy kazoo. I wanted a show where the idea of human conversation would be alive again, because so much of it is not alive anymore.
One of my favorite episodes of the show was not too long ago. You talked to a friend of both of ours, Mr. Corey Miller, and discussed, it was one of the ones where you opened up a little bit more and discussed your lifelong battle with depression and suicide. Have you ever been happy?
Yeah, right now. But it took a long time to get there, didn't it? Up until the last couple of years, the answer to that question would be no. Right now is when I've been happy. Now, the reason why I wanted Corey to come on the show and talk about the stuff we talked about, depression, suicide, all those happy things, is that he would understand my story, and because of his struggles with depression. And whereas he is really, I think, still dealing with this, I don't feel that I am anymore. I feel that it is very much in the rearview mirror and not going to come back. And, I take some medication, but I also am very aware now. What's really nice is that I'm on this sort of like plateau for the last 4 or 5 years where nothing gets me too low and everything seems to get me high. That's good. I feel very fortunate that at least I reached that stage in my life. And as I said in that podcast, the best thing about not killing myself was that, and I spent a lot of time thinking about that, but the best thing was that I reached this age where I could appreciate and love what I'm doing and my family. And I would have never gotten to meet my 2 grandboys. And I think about that, and boy, look what I would have missed. Wow.
Yeah, that's so powerful. We're very happy to have you with us, Bud.
I'm very happy to have me with me too.
Before we get to the very last question that everyone gets asked, I have one more, and that is just give us 3 things that you'd love to do. It sounds like from everything that we've talked about that you've done quite a bit already, but there has to be 3 things that you're still pining to get out there and do. So what are 3 things that you'd still like to do?
Well, you said do already. You've done it already. Marcus, it's getting kind of late in the day here for me.
You got plenty of time still.
I might. My dad lived till he was 96. My mother was 80. So, I might still have some time. Anyway, well, one thing I want to do, or Arlene and I want to go, is to go to North Africa. And I think we're going to do that maybe next year. Who knows? Or we're going to go to Paris and Portugal. I don't know. We talk about this. And then for sure, I would just love to run around Eastern Europe to visit all my sponsors and friends. And maybe my sponsors will sponsor my trip to Eastern Europe. Yeah. Oh, thank you, OmniSend. Okay. So I should get them in there. And so Eastern Europe, because I am European, as I mentioned. Really, I am a mixture of all kinds of European countries. And then last would be to go maybe into space. Well, I don't know which rocket I'd want to go on. Let's just say that, okay?
Do you want to just generally go to space, like the Blue Origin just goes up and comes right back down, or do you want to go somewhere in space?
Let's go somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to just do a little joyride. That's not for me. Okay, come on, that's a little ridiculous. But to maybe spend a couple of days,
at least orbit.
Yeah, or no, not in orbit, at the space station. I mean, I don't want to be just going around. I mean, you go in the space station and do stuff, but
sure,
yeah. Oh, one last thing too. Since we're moving and we're going through a lot of junk and throwing a lot of stuff out, I have a lot of slides. Remember slides? Oh, you probably don't know slides. Slides are like little negatives that you put into this little.
Yeah.
I have about 3,000 of those that need to get digitized, and I don't know how to do them except one at a time, and that's not going to work. My dad has. I mean, we have so many, and I don't want to just throw them all out. Maybe I'll digitize them all and donate them to the Openverse. What do you think of that idea?
There you go. There are services that'll do that for you. If you send them the slides, they'll digitize them and send you back your slides.
The problem is they're really expensive. I have a lot of 8mm film, and one thing that I have digitized is that I have a 16mm without sound film, which has been digitized, of his and my mother's wedding on February 25th, 1951. Wow. Most people don't have anything like that. Maybe they don't even have a picture. I have it in film. What's really cool is to see like a reception line where my aunts and uncles, when they were in their 20s and 30s, oh my God, it's just fabulous. That is one of the best treasures I have in my life, and it's now been digitized. So I should put some of that stuff online because it's amazing, just amazing.
Okay, Bud, we've made it to the final question. The final question.
Thank God. Really?
It takes a slight spin from what you normally ask, which is who you would recommend to be on the show, because you're the host. So who would you like to interview on a future episode of Seriously, Bud?
Well, one thing before I answer, I know the answer, but one thing before I answer, which is the thing about the show that I regret in a bit, but not really, I don't know, is that I only interview people once. You only get one shot. At least that's the way the show is now. And I have a pretty nice little lineup of people that are coming, and it seems to be like an endless supply, which is great. Okay, I love that. But the person that I reached out to and would love to interview is Mary Hubbard. Now, she's the new executive director of the WordPress project, at least new from the last couple of months ago. I have had some brief communication with her. I know she's super busy, but so what? And I think it'd be so Mary, this would be a really good way for you to get to know more people, or more people really to get to know you. And I think that's what you would probably want. That's it. So I hope that Mary Hubbard will come on the show. I don't know her at all.
I don't either. And I would love to, learn her story a bit more. So I think that's a fantastic choice.
So before you tell me to go, I want to thank you, Marcus, for doing this, especially since part of this got screwed up and now we got this thing on the right track. So thanks for doing this. And you've been such a good friend from day one when we first met.
No worries, Bud. I appreciate you letting me do this. I brought the idea to you because I wanted to hear your story. I think that people want to hear your story as well.
Well, we'll find out.
Whether you think so or not. I think people are interested in your story and they don't get to hear it because you're the host on the other side. So I appreciate you giving me this opportunity to interview you and get your story out there as well.
Thanks, Marcus.
Hey, I didn't know that Bud moved from Ohio to New York City to pursue a career in insurance. Knew he would marry his wife Arlene on the second date, and told her. Can name just about any song in a note or two, and wants to someday be recreated as an AI fount of wisdom. Did you? Thanks again, Bud, for letting me borrow the host seat this week. I really enjoyed getting to know more about you for once.
That's enough out of you, Marcus. Now it's time for me to take over to thank you, the listener, especially if you've listened to the last hour. Come on, face it. It's the best hour you ever had in your life. Maybe it's the second best. Anyway, thanks again. And until next time, thank you for your time.